trying to work on a project with me, and it's been really hard to find like a developers, because even all the people that I know in the space, all the developers that they know are so busy. So it's like impossible.
Well, I think that's the big, we're in that early phase, and it's actually it's very encouraging because we're in this early phase where if you just build even the most, if you just apply, if you build the most basic Web3 thing, like crypto version of XYZ concept, whether it's an analog thing that exists in the real world, or you're just building a Web3 version of a Web2 company, like, uh, it's so easy to build that you can quickly see if it actually works, if it's sticky. And if it actually works and there's human behavior around it, then you've got enough evidence to get momentum and to build, like, all the tools are there, like it's very easy. But what positive thing is, it is so lucrative because we're so early, and it's like you get, like, getting paid is intimately tied with user behavior.
Mhm.
So you don't have to go raise funds from VCs, and you don't have to go take bank loans or anything, or even like set up like PayPal payments or anything else like that. So because it's so lucrative immediately, as soon as like something starts working, um, it's attracting tier 1 to tier 3 developers from all these big firms. So like Google, Facebook, and all these, like Microsoft, all these like big, quote unquote scary tech companies that everybody's hating on the last decade. They can't hold on to their people. Anybody with a pulse is like, no, I can code. I'm having people here in Bali who are like randomly taking meetings with me just to like find out, well, like, how do I get into this? Which one, like, just in the initial stages of like, which change should I start studying? And like, this is so interesting to me because I'm not a coder. I have a more of a social science perspective lens on these things. So no, it's quite interesting. So that's actually very positive in my view, that it'll naturally, the companies that are like sucking up talent and not actually putting them to work, it becomes increasingly a large opportunity cost to like take a large salary and do nothing in Google, versus, okay, just bet on yourself and you'll know within a few, 6 months or a year whether or not you're on to. You could have the most tiny niche company or organization, but it could still have, 1 million users and be 1,000th of the market share or something. So
Yeah. Yeah, and like my plan right now is to combine all of the people that I know who I think would be the the good assets for this space. And so I've been talking to my friends from the Bay and the ones who code, and they've been asking me about NFTs, and I want to get them to like think more about learning how to do Solidity and Rust, and then I'm talking to my artist friends too and getting them interested in the idea of doing NFT projects. And then I'm talking to my other friends who are like more creative people in terms of organization, and like I want to bring them all together and build these NFT projects and kind of like create a little incubator thing using the people that I already know that trust me and trust my opinion, and just kind of connect them all together.
the cool thing is, like, the I think 2022 is going to be, I mean, everybody's been saying this on Twitter, but I really do think that DAOs offer the possibility for um, people to convert community into specific projects that,
Mm-hmm.
if they're conceived well, um, can be lucrative, or at least achieve the goals that maybe weren't quite possible before. I think people often are just like, oh, well, DAOs are just like crowdfunding, and
Mm-hmm.
it's different.
Yeah,
And
it's way more engaging than that.
yeah, and it's also a little bit weird that um, the DAOs on Ethereum, they're still super janky in my view. Like, I don't I don't find them usable at all. Like I look at things from my perspective, and like one thing that seems, you could have made a lot of money even after like the iPhone 4, like 5 years into the iPhone, you could have just loaded up on Apple stock and you would have outperformed almost like 95% of people just betting on the most obvious thing, that like this thing has a lot of room to grow and it's working so well now. um, you can, and that's just from a consumer perspective, and I think that's one of the things that I think like I'm the most excited for DAO tools for Solana. That you and I actually discovered that same DAO tool you shared. What was it called? We discovered it like within the same. What was it?
Suites or Studio XYZ.
Else.
What was it?
But yeah, it was like a token maker, and then it was like a DAO in a box kind of uh, thing that you could build, but uh, it still had some. But I remember I think I was just curious about it, and I discovered it through a Google search, and then you shared it the next day, and I was like, oh, interesting. It's not like we saw the same.
Yeah. And there's a lot of NFT projects too that are trying to do similar things. And you can really create like I think of NFT projects as if well, obviously if you're building a game or if you're trying to do just an art profile picture collection, you kind of want to generate some sort of hype around it. So you have to build the community first anyway, but you're also like building the brand as well. And so you can literally do anything you want with that brand, and you can keep people engaged. And so I see for musicians and artists, like people are going to be inspired by their style, and so the brand is like their style as well. And you can get people excited about certain people's styles, and then that can carry through any project that they do. There's this one guy, his name is John Lay, and he has done a bunch of NFT art. And sometimes he works on projects, but he does a lot of one-to-one like auctions where people just go to Olaplex or something or
Mhm.
OpenSea and then bid on his stuff. And he has a huge following just because of his art style. And like, I don't know, it's cool that you
I
can do
definitely
that
think that's a
with
major thing.
music.
It feels like what it's doing is the online trend of like having long tail segmentation of the marketplace, where instead of everybody coalescing around, let's say like Michael Jackson style or Madonna style or whatever it was, like you had like a few large categories of styles. With this was pre crypto, people were already getting like more niche styles, and like Instagram influencers were the new, whatever, like red carpet people. And then they would, instead of doing endorsements, they shifted to just directly owning their own brands. I think Mr. Beast is the most famous recent example.
Yeah.
But I had a conversation on this topic literally yesterday, where I was talking to this woman, and she was in her early 20s, and she was saying how she wanted to shift to so I'm in Bali, Indonesia, and there's a lot of influencers, a lot of stylish people here. And she was saying, she's like, she's like, I think I'm going to start all shops. And I was like, what's all shops? And there was a little bit of maybe a translation or an accent issue or something. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, oh, it's this thing where you have have you ever used Instagram Live? Have you ever done that?
Mhm.
Okay. So a bunch of these people I know, they just will randomly turn on Instagram Live and just set it down in the corner and then continue their lives like the Truman Show. But it's like a real thing, especially in Southeast Asia. I've noticed that like people are very comfortable doing that. And I'm a little bit, it's new to me. So I'm like not used to just like having a camera pointed at me, and it feels weird, even though you and I are doing this kind of broadcast weekly. But anyways, cut back to, so this person does Instagram Live all the time randomly, and then people get on and they're commenting in the moment and all that. And I guess I sound like a grandpa right now, but so she's like, yeah, this I'll just, what I'll do is I'll buy like 20 outfits and I'll wear it, and then I'll just do an Instagram live and then let people, buy, limited runs of the outfits I'm wearing. And she was saying how she's got random fans all over like Indonesia who want to buy her exact outfit in the size, and then they'll just like, and what she was describing it, I thought it was a company. She was saying like All Shop. It's like a term that people use now for social media, like clothing shopping. So,
Wow.
and you know what it made me think of? I was like, oh, you're describing QVC, where like you get on there
Mhm,
and you just like are
mhm.
like, well, there's this, and I was like, oh my god, they like literally they just stumbled upon QVC that existed in the 80s and 90s, where people would be on at like 2 a.m. and seeing like there's a limited run of this like special knife that can cut through like Coke cans. It's just like regular
Yeah,
people like doing like clothing demonstrations. So I
yeah.
thought that was
Th-
fascinating.
That is cool. And I think there's a lot of different room for that kind of thinking. My friend, she said, "Oh, I had this idea." She's an artist, and I was talking to her about NFTs because I love her art and I want her to NFT-size her art. And she said, "Oh, for a long time, I wanted to do some kind of digital gallery, and because physical galleries charge something like 50 to 60% of the revenue of the sale a lot of times for art, and she has a lot of friends who are good artists, who are paid artists, and she wants to create a digital gallery." And I said, this is I can show you one right now that I have that does this exact thing. And it's the portals one that I was telling you about. Like
Are
you
you're
can
going to turn your room into a gallery?
you could do that. Like conceivably you can take your room. And then also portals is expanding. They have this whole thing where they're going to have a downtown area where you can walk around in the world. And then because you are a portals room owner, you can also rent space out in the world,
On the
not just
street
like your room.
level? Okay,
Yeah.
so you've got your room in some dimension above the street, and they're like, we're going to go
Mhm.
down one, and the only people who are allowed to rent street front are room owners.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can come in for free and be a tourist and walk the downtown. But if you want to have a commercial space, you first have to have a residential space.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
what you could imagine is, let's say someone, it depends how they do it, if they end up selling directly residential properties, like in portals, or if they don't, and then they, let's say, sell it to portals people, then portal people can then be first in line, so to speak, to buy resident, like their commercial, and then lease it out. Let's say you
Yeah.
wanted to do a pop-up store or something.
They're doing that. They're doing a whole nother drop and they're calling it citizens cards or something. And you have to have a portals in order to mint the citizens cards. And my other friend, he wants to create he has a bunch of optician clinics, and he wants to create a digital glasses store where you can he can show the glasses in a
Physical
3D.
real glasses, and then you can,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And so you use the NFTs as like the way to buy the digital
You
representation.
know this company called Stitch Fix?
That sounds familiar.
Okay, this is a online uh, uh, shop that they use, what are they called? A personal stylist, that like they took the concept of personal stylist and then like digitized it so you can have like, it's algorithmically like knows your sizes, and they pre-ship a bunch of clothes and you could try them on, and then you just like send back the stuff you don't want. And but then there's a video aspect where a real life human stylist is like working with you. So you've got like an augmented thing where like the AI is trying to figure out what style fits your body and works for you. And then also you've got a human curator who's in the loop with your thing. But then this seems like the next generation of that, which is we'll do that, but like in VR. Like buy
Yeah.
these physical glasses, but you can try them on in VR.
The Dragons actually just created these 3D hoodies that they're VX, they're like they're virtual 3D elements, so they could conceivably take those and we can wear those in like any any virtual space. And then they also are going to do something where you can redeem it for an actual physical one, and they only made 420 of them, and it's like,
Everything
you
is
know,
42069
yeah,
now.
yeah, and it was for 69 Bokus.
Oh, for
but
of course.
but
Uh,
they're
it's
trying
like
to,
Western numerology, whereas in China, everybody used to make fun of the Chinese for like if you go on the buildings in China, they would be like there would be no number four on the buildings. It'd go 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 because four sounds like it's the same sound, and that means death. And then like they would put 8 or 88 or 888 on everything. And I was like, oh, I used to like laugh at the Chinese. I was like, they're so obsessed with numerology. I thought they were supposed to be like communist and scientific, and that. And then in America, we're just like 420 weed, Hitler's birthday, 69 sex position, and it's like, okay, well, we both have our things.
yeah, yeah,
Sorry,
the Dragons have been like having some big sales. Do you know who Cosimo de Medici is?
no.
He's this big Twitter guy. He makes these things called Medici Minutes, and he does these kind of hot takes on what's popular in crypto. And he has like 180,000 followers, and he just
Pretty
bought
decent.
8 dragons.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, and like the
How many
floor
total
on,
dragons are there?
there's 1,111.
Oh, so it's also numeral. Oh, it's 111. Okay.
Yeah,
You know, that's Alibaba's famous Singles Day sale. On
yeah.
November 11th is like it's like Christmas Eve, like, or it's like Black Friday or Cyber Monday for Amazon. Alibaba on 11/11, they sell like the most online stuff in like history every year. And
That's
so
so
Dragons did that. I wonder if Dragons has like, who are the people behind it, if they're like East Asian or something.
Yeah, we think one of them is the CEO of Quant, which is like a huge company,
I
like a
just saw that somewhere on
billion
Twitter.
dollar company. And one of
Okay.
them is like somehow a founder of that company. And they like the floor now is 400 Solana on the Dragons.
What was it last time we were talking?
It was like it was at like 250, and then it went down to 160, and then it went all the way back up to 300, and now it's at 400.
Someone was saying, I saw this tweet about Bored Ape Yacht Club or something, that the floor price has gone up in Ethereum terms or Solana terms for these different like tier one, what would you call it? Tier one JPEGs,
Yeah.
tier one NFTs. But
Blue
so,
chips is what they
yeah,
call
so in if the crypto terms, they're up, but in dollar terms they've stayed stable, right?
Yeah.
So but if the crypto returns and the floor price stays at where it's at, you'll see a net in dollar terms return.
This is what I've been trying to think of as the market has gone down, because like in December, Solana was $250 each, and now it's 90 something. So it's a big difference, but I don't think of it like dollars. I think of like, I need to accumulate more Solana in my trading. So everything is now pumping in Sol. So the projects that were like 1 are 3 now, and the projects that were maybe 2 are like 10. So
Yeah,
there's a way for it to adjust back.
I remember Portals, you minted it for like 1.5 the first night, you minted 2, and then when I called you, it was 18 the next morning. Was it 18 that much? Or was it,
Yeah.
it went down to like 11. And I was still like, I don't know if I want to spend $2,000. I even will put it on this like broadcast. I'm like, I don't know, $2,000 is still a lot. Now, what is it at? Like
It shot all the way up to 60 at one point, and now it's at 40 something, 48.
That's a lot. That's like a significant appreciation.
Yeah. So
Well,
I mean, even though Solana went down, it's still up a lot, and they keep releasing new updates, and they keep updating the progress of the project, and uh they got people from BioWare to come work on it. They got like legal virtual real estate legal experts are now working with them, like the same people who work with Sandbox and Decentraland and stuff.
well, it's interesting because the idea is, and here's maybe I was a little bit, it's still early and I'm still like debating what stuff I want to get involved in. But one of the things that comes to mind when you're thinking about virtual real estate is in your mind, you think, okay, well, what drives price, right? And if you're in it for an entertainment or something, that's one thing. And so you'll just have to figure out your entertainment budget or whatever, right? But from my perspective, I don't. I would just do it as like investment in real estate. Whether I would invest on to buy the local 7-Eleven that has a lot of foot traffic, or whether it's portals anticipating a lot of virtual foot traffic, right? But then you think, okay, well, it's a virtual real estate, so these people can then just keep increasing supply, and the unit price won't go up even if demand goes up, right? But then so you have that same issue with general tokenomics or whatever, right? And like figuring out the burn rate and supply demand. But here's something that I think I had a conversation with Trevin last night about, which was, there is a choke point in this whole ecosystem, which is there are only, and it's not forever, but like there's basically speaking, there's a limited number of talented engineers available in the world. And the ones that are available for crypto are limited. And then the ones that are available for NFTs are even more limited. And as these market caps go up, they tend to attract more and more talented developers. But the idea that like just, some derivative portals might come along, like if the team that itself is a super high quality team, that they're going to know not to dilute their product too much and play the long game, and and then they'll attract more and more developers. So that's part of the, I think for you, you're able to develop better conviction because you spent more time doing the homework to understand the teams. Whereas for me, I'm still like a tourist in the space. And so I don't have conviction like you do. So I'm just like, I don't know, like it looks like virtual rooms. Maybe just there's other people who will create virtual rooms, so like the whole VR NFT Sims world being rebuilt, it seems like a real thing. But then the question is like, well, which teams, which worlds do I want to invest in? And I'm still on the fence on a lot of these.
I think there definitely is going to be a culling. There's a lot of projects now that people just want to ride off the hype, and especially like in Solana specifically, they see, oh, metaverse, they see that, and they see the popularity of some project, and then everybody wants to do that same thing. But you can really tell the difference between the high level teams and the ones that are just doing it for just to make some quick money. And the project that I showed you, where they're doing they're using the sale of the NFTs to buy land in the Bahamas.
Oh, real land?
Yeah, actual land. Like they want to buy an island in the Bahamas based off of the sale of the NFTs, and then they're going to parcel out that land, and they have a legal team from the Bahamas working with them on like a real estate legal experts.
Sam from FTX is based out there, and he's been working with the government of the Bahamas, who is the Bahamas, the Cayman Islands, these guys were like OG players in offshore money from the beginning. So they're all about, like, it's not surprising at all when you think about it that they're the most receptive to next gen money, right? Like their whole, they've made all their money, all their like super top, you can make money like servicing tourists, and or you can make money by catering to bankers. And this is like a third generation of that, in my opinion. This is amazing.
Yeah,
So
they're creating a CBDC too, Bahamas are. And I wonder how that's going to tie into
I mean,
their whole thing.
it depends. In my view, central bank. Okay, central bank digital currency. Like I think, I don't know if you saw in my Discord, I was chatting about the stablecoin debate because that's a big thing in DC right now, and this new bill that might try to like co-opt Circle and Tether, and but the bigger issue to me is, like, right now it looks like all the momentum for stable coins is going for US dollar stable coins, and that is a huge wind to America's back, because then America gets to still basically, do you remember the concept? I don't know if I explained it on these videos, but like, do you know Signorage? Do you know what that is? It's like do you know what coin clipping is, or debasement of coins, debasement of money, right? Like all these civilizations over time, they'll issue, money has different forms, right? But the most common form of money is like metal coin money, right?
Coins, yeah.
Yeah, metal coins. And so the way that like a lot of the way that metal coins would work for money is that a government would issue like silver or gold coins, and they'll have like some percentage of gold, some percentage of silver, or whatever. And that's why, like, you'll see in like old movies, they'll like take a bite of the thing, because of the like gold is super valuable. So if it's like not very much gold, if it's like a harder metal, then it won't bend as easily as gold would. And so what governments would do over time, this is like classic debasement of money, is they would start to remint the metals, but they would like melt them down again and take out, dilute some of it. So if it was like let's say it was 80% silver coin and 20% some other metal, what they would do is reduce it to 70% silver. And then that's what, but here's the thing, Signorage is you're debasing your money through inflation or whatever, but the people who are bearing the cost of that are not your citizens. So Signorage is when the foreign governments or foreign peoples that are not in your tax base are the ones carrying the cost of that. So when the US dollar gets printed like crazy the last 2 years, 30% of I think 30% of dollar, I don't know what percentage it is, but I think it might be 30% of dollars are held by Americans and like 70% by foreign governments and stuff. So if the government prints a bunch of dollars and then just wires that money, like they airdrop dollars into American citizens like bank accounts during the last 2 years, remember, for COVID, it's net positive for American citizens in the short term, because it's literally like we just took $2 trillion. If they airdrop $2 trillion out of thin air, 500 billion of that is coming from American inflation, and like 1.5 billion of that is coming from foreigners just like losing money. So it's net Americans gain 1.5, I should say trillions. Americans gain like 1.5 trillion in net purchasing power. That's why you saw this like crazy spike in imports while everybody was sitting at home not working. Normally, like, you're over consuming when you have a lot more money to buy imports. Like, you'll see like skyrocketing imports in like oil rich countries because they can buy all the Bentleys and iPhones they want. And so there's this thing called the Dutch disease, which is like when Holland discovered oil, they had this giant industrial base, but then because they were exporting all this oil and getting cash, it was like driving up the cost of their currency, which would then make their locally made products, like industrial products, super expensive on the international market. So it collapsed their manufacturing base, right? So like currencies are intimately tied with like your local currency is intimately tied with your ability to like how competitive your manufacturing goods are on the international market. And so that's the whole thing. For like 10, 15 years, the US government was hectoring the Chinese because when their exports were going through the roof for like 15 years versus America, like they were exporting 3-1 to American imports, like trade between the US and China. Their currency should have been relatively appreciating over time, but they fixed their currency. So like there was no natural, like naturally their products would get more expensive over time and it would balance out. But because they were suppressing their currency, their exports kept going without any sort of resistance in the currency. So that's one of the things that happens with when you like manipulate currencies and stuff. So the Bahamas, it's going to be interesting to see. Like it's like City DAO was I think the first one in the world. With the guy from City DAO follows me actually, because I was like person number 5 at his Discord, and we were. And then it just got I like removed myself from the Discord because I got overwhelmed. But like they bought like whatever 6 months ago or a few months ago, like some random rocks, like some patch of land in Wyoming. And I'm like, I want to visit it, but you know, it's still like what you buy still matters. Like it's awesome that you could finally buy some like real land in the real world, but you know, I'd love to see what they're going to do in the Bahamas.
Yeah, I'm curious as well. And there's enough interest in the project, but they haven't released a price. And I know that Solana specifically has a lot of flippers in it. So it's people who all they care about is how much money can I make off of this instantaneously or like in a day or something. So it's kind of hard to gauge a project's interest, like legitimate long-term interest sometimes. And you really have to see who gets shaken out. They call it shaking out the paper hands of the project.
So the paper hands is a derivative expression from diamond hands.
Yeah, paper hands are people who just sell a project right away. And
that's you. You do that.
Yeah, I do it. Like every trader does this, where like what I'm doing right now in my own personal journey is, since I'm in so many projects, because when I first got in, I was just buy this, buy this, buy this. But now I'm like, oh, there isn't really a point in me staying in these projects because it takes my attention away from the things that are doing really well. And so what I'm trying to do is create like the system of efficiency where, okay, if I keep a project, I'm keeping it because I see like a value in it long term. And maybe other ones, I'm just waiting for some specific thing to happen, then I can sell and get out. Sometimes I just don't care because I'm just like tired of keeping up with the project. And
I do think the time and attention cost is for me, and I think for probably a lot of people, it's the most important cost, because it's like, okay, I'm paying for bandwidth, I'm paying for electricity, like crypto, NFTs, and all this. Especially crypto originally was mostly associated with, people were thinking like energy costs and like mining and stuff, and it was not, besides Bitcoin and maybe Ethereum and a handful of other things, there weren't a lot of like utility real world projects that were doing real things. And in the last, since DeFi summer, so call it 18 months ago, or maybe 2 years ago, but like less than 2 years, you had this, in my view, DeFi proved that there's like now liquid working markets to chase these crypto projects that are going to do real things. And I think I've mentioned to you, like I'm like closely watching Helium and what they're doing, because it's one of those things where I was like, it's exactly the kind of use case that's the most obvious, which is like super high transaction volumes, like thousands of transactions a second, following tiny, like the human being would never find it useful to spend fractions of their time constantly making 1/1000th of a penny. right? But like Solana or some random tokens could follow a single bit or byte, or 1 megabit, and get paid 1 cent for it, whereas for us we would we just throw it away. It's like not worth it. So it is interesting what's the time aspect of like focusing on projects and developing expertise on it is key, I think.
And that's why I think one of the big things for this year, especially if the bear market continues, is going to be GameFi. And because we've seen that crypto play to earn games have kind of weathered the storm, because even in a bear market, you can still play and you can still make money. And okay, that amount is less than when it is in
dollar terms.
Yeah, in dollar terms.
Or you could at least say wherever you are, whether you're in the Philippines or in the US, it's less in fiat terms than it is in but still, it's still earning.
And GameFi kind of combines play to earn, where you have to like buy the NFT and then you play with that character, and then you earn the in-game currency in that game, which you can then trade. And then it also combines DeFi stuff, where you can take the governance token. So there's this one on Harmony called DeFi Kingdoms, and you buy one, which is their governance token on the Harmony network, and you take that cryptocurrency and you buy Jewel in this game. And the game, you can then stake Jewel in the bank, and then you can earn a percentage of the trading fees on the DEX that they created. And then you can also do a liquidity providing thing, where you're locking in liquidity and you're pairing it to a stable coin with Jewel. So you do like Jewel and one are combined in a liquidity pool, and then you can earn interest on that, and it just sits there and you keep earning interest based on all these other metrics that I'm not completely sure of. But you can then take the Jewel that you created and then use that to buy heroes, NFT characters that you can then go send on quests and earn gold, which like the gold is used to like boost your character and to be able for you to earn more in-game currency, which you can then turn back into Jewel, or you can swap into like one or any other thing. Because in addition to having a game element, a DeFi element, and they also have a swap, where you can literally go there and you can just swap all of the tokens that you created into Ethereum, into whatever. And so you pay a percentage fee based on whatever they charge, and then you get that back through staking. So it's kind of all this, like they're incentivizing you to stake so you can add to the total value locked in the game. And then they actually have liquidity backing the price of their currencies and stuff.
So that you're not stuck with some crappy asset. You're stuck with, I can convert this into ETH, Sol, whatever, and it's real and it's coming back to me, and then they can't. But what's their, do they have like published tokenomics, like how much they're creating?
They released a white paper that explains all of their processes, and it goes into detail with the specifics.
And there's control on the tokenomics of it, or what?
Yeah, everything's kind of like set in stone right now with the tokenomics. And
this is the biggest key for me, is why I'm a little bit skeptical of DAOs generally, which is, I think, and there's going to be a lot of models, right? Like in the US or in the world, but let's just take the US for now. There's like 5 or 10 different models for like human organization, right? There's like sole proprietorship, which is just like a dude doing something. Then there's like LLC, which is one guy or maybe 2 guys or people doing things together. then you've got like S corp, you've got nonprofits, you've got this like spectrum of things, right? And then you've got, okay, nonprofit organization, but it's not a charity, right? So like the NRA is like a nonprofit that's not a charity, and it's like got an objective, right? I mean, DAOs that tried to, the DAO that tried to buy the Constitution, it's not a charity. It's like not feeding the poor, but it was like it's not a for-profit thing necessarily. It was just like a thing, like, and then you've got you know, public companies, private companies. So you've got these like this spectrum of things. Some of these organizations are there with the objective of like making profit for their owners. And then on another end of the spectrum, they're like pure charities that are like, no, this entity is here to like feed the homeless. And then there's these things in between. And then like, you know, obviously the big thing that I notice in our lifetimes is like a lot of these charities have like, what's the appropriate word? They've kind of become semi-corrupted, where they're like don't pay, you know, the whole point of a charity is that like you're not paying taxes. So like if you're like tax exempt charity, you're not paying taxes on your property or whatever. You don't pay sales taxes. I remember at the university they would give us like a special card, and with like, and so when we go to like a bar that would be like a student organization, they'd be like, we're not paying the DC sales tax, which was like 8% or something. So like, and we'd have to take like show them the card and take the receipt and stuff. And like, and the university was very specific about we don't pay taxes, right? And you've got like some of these charities, like you know, they'll pay themselves giant salaries. So, but okay, with DAOs that are like, let's say nonprofits or straight for gaming, right? This GameFi, maybe you get a governance token. The participants could eventually take control of it over the founders, and the founders would be happy to eventually lose control, and then they cash out because they've created this game, this like ecosystem that's now can live without them, right? It'll grow up to a certain point. And so I don't have any problem with someone being medium term or long term greedy. Like I don't view that as a rug pull. Like if to me, like a rug pull is like if you're just like flipping it and then the thing doesn't survive without you. To me, that's a rug pull. To like if you've incubated something to the point where it can survive without you, then it's just like a natural evolution of, and we kind of like that with our companies, right? We don't want Bill Gates at, you know, 65, like still having 51% of like Microsoft, you know, this massive several trillion dollar company. You're happy that he's like giving out equity and slowly phasing down his participation in this massive entity that shareholders can vote for. So with a DAO that controls like a gaming system, you can see the alignment in like they want the game for the fun of it and for the money of it, and they could keep it going. But when I see like, that's one end of the spectrum. When I see like DAOs that are basically trying to like recreate an internet-based corporation that's like creating a product and a company, it makes me a little bit skeptical, because what the hell does, like, I don't mind like shareholders supporting and keeping Steve Jobs in his role, or Elon Musk. I was like for 10 years as like a Tesla shareholder and like supported him, right? But it's not like I had if they put the proposals of like what to build next, like they do with DAOs, like what should we do as a community? It's like, dude, why are you? I don't want the mob to decide what the organization is doing. I want the guy who's the genius to decide. So like, so that's kind of my big, kind of where I'm quite skeptical of some of these DAO governance systems, because I don't think that's a good way to run certain kinds of organizations.
Yeah, I see that a lot in NFTs, where it's kind of disheartening when you see people who have good ideas and then all of a sudden they're like, and then we're going to put the next steps to the community. And I'm like, does that mean you don't have a plan? Like you don't really like care what happens after that? And it also can be like a signal that this project is going to maybe slow rug. So instead of like a hard rug, it's a soft rug.
Did you come up with that? The slow rug versus the hard rug?
Yeah,
okay, so you and I, so I'm naturally coming to the conclusion, okay, medium, long term, it doesn't have to have the same leadership, so it's not necessarily a rug. There is a concept called slow rug, long rug, which is just like it's not
Hard rug. Yeah, it's like
that's
hard rug and soft rug, and then or they'll call the soft rug slow rug sometimes. And like the hard rug is where like you mint and they immediately run with the money. Like they don't even let you trade it on the secondary
it's
market.
gone.
And the slow rug is like maybe they wait like a week to drag it out and like, oh, they'll do this one thing. Like I was in this project where this guy he created a token and he created a liquidity pool and he was like, oh, we're gonna do this own fork thing. And then he was doing the project like building for weeks, and then once the liquidity pool had a certain amount of money in it, then he just pulled everything. So he made money threefold because he made money off of the initial sale of the NFTs, he made money off of the secondary marketplace royalties, and he made money off of just taking all of the money from the liquidity pool. So he just
Wait, 3 times or 3x? Like he made money those 3 different ways. How
Yeah,
much did
three
he
different.
make off of it?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I think he at least made $50,000 from the liquidity pool plus whatever the NFT sales were, which I think it was like 0.4 and there was maybe 2,000. So like
Yeah,
500 something.
that's like investing in penny stocks or whatever. Like it's when you're getting to liquidity pools with 50 grand in it, like dude, you could just buy that all, you could do that all yourself. So
Yeah, he built
the,
it himself.
yeah, so that's like just straight fraud to me. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I don't want to get governments involved in stuff. Like I would just prefer if people are aware that like you're getting a bad deal. Like I think that's like when you go to, it's like when you're at like some, like what's the appropriate, like you're at some, you know, market in Morocco or some crap, you're buying something and like this looks like it could be really crappy, like okay fine, just I don't think that guy's, I mean maybe it's like pretty close to the edge of fraud, but it might also be like, look, this is what, but I mean, although with this one you're telling me he literally stole the money in the liquidity pool, that's pretty obviously fraud. So
Yeah.
but like
So it was considered a slow rug because he didn't do it right away. He waited a few weeks and then he just kind of
it's
phased out.
a clear theft, in my opinion. You
Yeah.
stealing money out of like a bank account, basically, or whatever.
All the people who put in like thousands of dollars into the liquidity pool really lost out. And there is, I feel like it's my responsibility to show people really how to figure out what's a good project and what's not. And even I feel like my own personal performance has improved as I've gotten better at figuring out which ones are legit projects, which ones are maybe they might be legit projects, but they might not have as much potential. And sometimes there's just random stuff that just a few people get excited about, but they all have a whole bunch of money. And so then the price just shoots up because all these people are buying.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think I saw a meme that was talking about like um, something. I think it was saying something like NFTs aren't real, and then there's like another image. It's like nothing is real, and like if you really break down like how much of like human behavior, how much of commerce is just like frivolous shit. That like why are you paying this amount of money for it? I don't know. I like it. Like
Mhm.
apparently that's not a legitimate answer for online goods and services, but like it is a legitimate answer for everything else in commerce. Like I'll just tell you, I don't know why. Do you know, like I bought this teak mug, and I have a bunch of like teak,
Oh, I love the teak stuff.
right? Or it's like Javanese, whatever, right? But
Mhm.
here's the problem. I use it for coffee because I like, you know how like a lot of like liquids and stuff, they use wood as a like way to like infuse flavor, like whiskeys do that, and like the cork associated with wines and stuff. But like there's a reason why people don't use wood mugs for like hot coffees and things. They like immediately like start cracking and like breaking
Mhm.
apart. And um but it's one of those things where like if you think about how much of like commerce is just like, I don't know, I like it, it's different, it like speaks to me. So I was listening to a podcast at the Super Team podcast. I shared it. I don't know if you listen to those guys from India.
No.
Oh, they're brilliant. They have the Solana people on it, and they have a bunch of they have the Matic founders. They have like really good, excellent questions. Anyways, you should listen to it. They had the guy from Sino Global Capital. Do you know him? Matty
That
Sino
sounds familiar.
follows
Yeah.
me now, but he was one of the early investors in. He's a huge Solana investor. So like he invests in the Solana ecosystem, like Solana and then Serum and Orca and all these others, right? But he had this thing that was, I thought, a very appropriate point, which was he was saying how he was like, everybody wants to, he was using bro terms, but he was like, everybody in every generation is going to want to flex, right? And he was saying like in his generation, I think he's like 50 or something. He was like, yeah, in my generation, like people would buy Ferraris and like big trucks and stuff to like flex in the real world. He was like, as everybody goes online, they're going to want to flex in different ways, peacocking or whatever. And it's like, that makes sense. Like all this like peacock avatar behavior with NFTs and stuff. Half the time, the whole point of the NFT is just that everybody knows that it's expensive. Like, what's the point
Yeah.
of Louis Vuitton and Gucci and these things? It's because they know that it's expensive. That's the point. It's called, there's a term called snob goods. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
Back in the 90s in Russia, the people would foreign companies would like flood into the Russian market because it was like this brand new open market, and like nobody had any brand loyalties or anything because like they'd been living under communism for 50 years. And so they realized that like if they had a brand of cigarettes and they lowered the price, the sales would collapse. But if they like quintupled the price, the sales would go through the roof. The unit sales, not the total money, like the
Mhm.
unit sales would go up because people wanted the good to signal for signaling purposes, not for the
Yeah.
intrinsic value purpose.
I feel like CryptoPunks and Bored Apes Yacht Club are at that point where they have that value and they have the status because people, even if they don't really know NFTs, they've seen the pictures before now. And so that is really interesting to see. Their community is also full of rich people, and that's kind of what they do anyway. Like, I have this status because I have this thing. And yeah, it's interesting to see what for me, I'm curious to see how the dragons specifically will develop because they are sort of headed in that direction, I think.
You have some
Um,
cool people who are rich, but rich by being cool, not by not they're not like investor rich. They're like Steve Aoki, right? He's like a really
mhm.
cool musician. Who are the other famous dudes with the
There's a
dragon?
few other crypto people, this guy Farouk.eth and the Cosmo guy, and K Dean is another dude who like a lot of people.
I really
Tim
liked
Dillon,
oh, Tim Dillon.
Dylan Francis, yeah.
Okay, I really liked Mike Tyson's. He
Yes.
had this shark. Was it a shark one?
Oh, the whale, the
The
killer
whale,
whale.
yeah, it was like a
Yeah.
whale, like with a cigar. And I went and like, I was like, man, I want to buy. I couldn't afford it. I mean, I could afford it, but I couldn't justify spending money on that shit. But
Their
like,
floor is up. Yeah, they did, but they the reason that project got popular in the first place was because people who had money got into it and they bought up all the cheap ones, and then the people who just wanted to sell sold. So like it's kind of exactly what happens with these projects when they get to a certain level. Everyone who just wants to make quick money sells, and then the people who this isn't that much money for them, they invest in it because they see that, oh, all these other people are jumping in.
Oh,
So
it is cool. It is valuable to me to
yeah,
be like, I'm in a group where Mike Tyson is in. And
yeah,
I just find him. I remember when I was in college, like he's like matured and stuff, but like I remember when there was a solid, both obviously when he was boxing, but even like 10 years after he had stopped boxing, where he was still quite insane. And like now we're used to the internet and seeing like insanity like thrown at us constantly. But there was a moment where like, do you remember like 10 years ago, like Charlie Sheen had his meltdown?
hmm,
But like he was like Tyson was effing nuts, right? And so it was also hilarious. And so anyways, I would love to be in like a group with I would find delight and entertainment just owning a an NFT that I know Tyson owns, and like I could flex saying I'm part of Mike Tyson's, NFT.
there's actually a group right now that they made an honorary NFT. So sometimes groups, if they want to honor specific people and they want to kind of associate them with their project, they will make a specific NFT using their art style and maybe the other person's like brand or whatever. So they made one for Shaq because
I
Shaq
saw
has now
him.
entered the Solana ecosystem.
Yeah, I saw him recent. Yes, today, tweeting something about.
Jungle Cats or
Okay.
something.
Yeah.
And I looked at the floor price and it's like 2.9 Solana for each one. And I was like, oh, well, that's actually
Not that expensive.
that expensive. And I think
Buy a
it's
pair
probably
of
because,
Jordans.
yeah, I mean, it'll probably go up in the next day. Like, I bet there will be a pump just because of that. And the fact that he accepted it and he tweeted about it too. So I'm sure that there will be a pump just
I
because
think
of
the
that.
fact that Twitter now has verified NFTs as like us, like it was a big thing for a long time trying to get Twitter to verify you, right, with a blue check mark.
They're
And
only doing
now,
it through OpenSea right now.
huh? Oh, so
They're
they don't accept Solana yet.
OpenSea is actually rumored to be listing Solana NFTs
Because
soon.
they don't their icon, it looks different if you have an
Mhm,
NFT verification, because I've seen them now. And
mhm.
yeah, I mean I can't wait because that would be really cool, like different NFTs. I think Seth Curry bought was it the Board Ape Yacht Clubs a couple months ago, and
Yeah,
so there are you're getting these guys get paid whatever tens of millions of dollars a year to endorse products, and they're doing it for free. So
mhm.
like they're they're shilling or pumping things that uh, they're not directly capturing most of the value.
It's also like with those specifically, like the celebrities buying into the project. Depending on the project, they themselves too are attaching another IP to their brand if they own the IP for that specific brand. Because some of them, like Bored Apes Yacht Club, you own the IP of the actual image once you become the owner of the NFT. But with CryptoPunks, all the IP is owned by Larva Labs, the company that created the
So if
CryptoPunks.
they want to make anything after that. Oh, so do you have a way to check? Because I know I saw something around that with there was a group last week that created a DAO to buy like an original copy of Dune, and they didn't realize that, like, did you hear about this? They bought for like $3 million. I don't know if this is real. I didn't like dig in. Like half the time something you read on the internet, you can't tell, is this a joke or real? But if it was real, what happened was they bought an original like printing of Dune, like one of the first few, for like $3 million. Like it was supposed to be like a Dune version of like the Constitution DAO, and they didn't realize that they didn't get like the IP rights to it. And I was like, can that be real? Like, did they really just like they were like, oh well, we're gonna pursue a movie with it, and it's like, no, man, you just get that one book. Like,
Yeah, well, that's something that I think each project is figuring out individually because with the artists, like they are creating the art, and so they have their own. And then with music, audio NFTs too, it's the same thing where you have your songs where you keep the rights, but then you have other things that you release where you release those rights
So
because
how
they're.
did Bored Ape Yacht Club put the IP rights into the NFT?
I think they decided that
Like
they.
the DAO owns it and you own a
I
fraction of
don't.
the DAO or what?
Well, there is like the community treasury, which they call like the DAO for Board Apes Yacht Club, but I think it's really up to like the individual uh, projects, and I'm not sure. There might be some specific thing that they do with the coding to like say that, but I think it's more about the framework that they put in place before everything
You know, this
launched.
to me, it like I know there's smart contract, like there's DAO laws in Wyoming that address smart contracts to a degree. Like whoever holds the DAO, the token, or holds the rights to the LLC to buy property or whatever. That's the whole point of like city DAO. So like the courts in Wyoming recognize this property. That has not been tested yet, whether or not uh, you can, whether, I mean, I think it would make sense if like two parties are uh, agreeing, whether we agree verbally, in writing, on video, or in a smart contract, that this is the transfer of these rights. Like I think it would take a court to be like, no, it's, you knew that you were getting, like let's say with CryptoPunks, they never said they were giving you the original IP rights when you bought it, so you can't claim that that's what you were getting. Whereas with Bored Ape Yacht Clubs, they're like publishing, like, no, you're getting the rights and XYZ. So if you were to test that in the courts, let's say, Disney wanted to like license the rights to make like a cartoon on Bored Ape Yacht Clubs or like Cartoon Network or something, right? Then at minimum, that would go to the community treasury, right? And you could then claim some of that money. But maybe on the extremes, let's say like they made a cartoon on, there's, I don't know how many Bored Ape yachts there are, Bored Apes there are, like 10 or 1,000, 5,000. It's not that rare then. But let's say they made a cartoon with like 5 or 10 of them, right? And they license it for like $1 million per character. But like, then they start to get into a question of, do each one of those 5 that were represented in like a cartoon that got licensing money, does that money go to the community or does that go to them? And that starts
with Bored Apes Yacht Club, it goes to them. Like the person who did the Adidas deal with Bored Apes Yacht Club, apparently, from what I read,
an individual person.
Yeah, because it was their ape that they used.
What? So Adidas paid them?
Yes, I believe so. And so conceivably, for like the dragons, they are kind of following a similar line where we own the IP. So
really?
if the dragons did get to that level, then I could license my dragon to like be on specific clothes, and then I would get that money. And there would probably have to be some other thing. But actually, what you were talking about with the legal stuff is um, with Bahamas and with that one NFT where they're trying to buy land, they did this AMA with this lawyer that they're working with, and he says that Bahamas is starting to treat smart contracts exactly the same as electronic bank signatures.
Like a DocuSign.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so like that kind of framework is the same, and then they're just going to apply it to the NFT. So that's how conceivably this Blue Terra NFT is going to work, where you are buying the NFT and it's like you are e-signing a lease, basically.
E-signing a transfer of ownership.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the interesting thing. That's what I was talking with Mawia about on that podcast, which was, he was saying in their smart city that they're building on the outskirts of Lusaka, he was like, he's thinking that he'll represent each plot of land and the material on the plot, aka the bricks, the walls, everything, with an NFT, and that can then he assigns the plots with a trust, and the trust can be owned by an NFT. Therefore, like, you don't have to have the individual, like, the trust is recognized in the country as the owner of the property. So then whoever, you don't have to have, like, Kelly Miller's passport number and all that stuff, right? So that transfers to whatever wallet. Then you're thinking, like, man, you better have some security around your NFT then. Like, the whole idea of, like, Coinbase having, like, there's self custody with your ledger, and then there's also, like, external custody with Coinbase or Gemini or whoever is holding it. Then you're really like, okay, better not snipe my NFTs. You literally
and
steal.
That's why you need hardware wallets.
Even a hardware wallet is not that secure, man. At least with land title, if the transfer hasn't been, like, the thing is like, I bought and sold land, like, properties in the US, right? It's like 1% of the cost of the property. Like, let's say you buy something for $200,000, you're paying $2,000 or $3,000 for title transfer plus title insurance, just to make sure that person A doesn't get screwed by some ancient law that people didn't figure out, that actually this property, that person didn't have the legal right to sell it to you because it was someone else who had claim on that land. So, like, title transfer and property rights, it's going to be very it's going to be important that they get through it. And I think NFTs does make it simplifies everything, right? However, in the event that, like, just like that guy who like lost his Bitcoin in a garbage dump, and he's like got a, I don't know how they figured out to, like, he bought the dump and he's like spending tens of millions of dollars, like, digging through trying to find that flash drive.
The British guy,
yeah. So if title for, you know what I mean? So they would have to, like, some court would have to say, like, we have this law in the US, like homestead laws all over the country, which is like, there's a certain amount of time where someone can, if there's like a building that's been abandoned, you can put a claim in the newspaper to say, I claim this building. And the owner of the building has a certain number of, like, years or some time limit to say, no, it's mine. You can't just, like, claim my property, right? It's mine. Here's my title. And if you don't refute that claim, the law in, like, certain places will say, okay, he put the claim on the land, the owner didn't challenge it, it's now yours after a certain time. It's the same way where, like, if you, like, abandon a car on the side of a road, like, the way a lot of, like, there was a multimillionaire who lived down the street from me in Dallas, and he owned a tow truck company, and his entire business model was, there is this rule in Texas, which is, if a car has been abandoned on the side of the road, you have 24 hours to clear it. Otherwise, anybody can claim it. And so what they would do is something like that. It was some time limit. Maybe it was 24 hours, maybe it was 72 hours. But you can't just, like, leave your car on the side of the road, right? And they would go by driving around in these tow trucks and then put a sticker on it, like, claiming the car. And then they would swing by again at, like, a day or two later or whatever. And then if it's still there, they just pick it up, and then they would sell it. They would sell it for parts, or, fix it and sell them or whatever. And this guy made, like, millions of dollars just, like, doing that.
Wow.
And so concepts around property and reallocation of property and who owns what there's actually, like, these are massive industries. And NFTs, like, the idea that, like, I could lose my house because I lost a thumb drive, like that.
Yeah, there's gonna have to be some sort of, like, backup thing that
it's early days, man.
Just tied. There's a lot of things that need to be sorted out, but it's cool to see these really early iterations. And the thing that excites me about NFTs is I just see the possibilities as limitless, what they can be and how they can attach themselves to our physical lives.
Dude, the possibilities are massive. I was talking for years after, I think I mentioned this to you, like, I wanted to buy real estate in Toronto or Canada after the Trump election. And I knew I was willing to put a significant money against it, but there were no REITs, available for me to buy on the stock market. And so the only way for me to play that um, bet or play that idea that I had with money was I'd have to fly to Toronto and like buy an apartment and go through the paperwork of it or buy some land or something. And I was like, that's such a pain in the ass. I don't have time to do that. I was like studying, and it seemed like, you'd have to like the minimum threshold, the same way you have like minimum staking or whatever, there's a certain threshold. It's like the minimum money I would need to play that bet would be like 100 grand or something, or $200,000, like just to play it. Whereas if you had REITs, you could just like, okay, there's like New York City REITs and Washington City REITs and stuff. So I could just spend like $100 worth of money on to buy like one share of a fund that owns a bunch, like Vornado owns a bunch of buildings in New York City. So if you want to play the New York City stock market, the New York City real estate market, you could play it for like $100. And so NFTs are going to obliterate that concept because REITs, city by city REITs are super rare. It's only a handful of the major cities have single city REITs. Like I made money in a fund for my family where I was playing the Austin market 5 years ago. And I owned a REIT that had exposure to Austin, but it was like the returns were super diluted because it was like 25% Austin, like 15% Dallas. And it was only like a third or more of the Austin market in that fund. It wasn't specific to that city. And I was like, oh, it would be so valuable to me if I don't want a bunch of, in their idea, they were like, we'll reduce the risk by spreading out the properties across the like Southwest. And I was like, reduce the risk, but also reduce the return. Because I don't want to play Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. I want to there's something specific going on in Austin, and I want Austin specific returns. And the idea of like NFTs owning real estate is going to be, it's going to open up a ton of liquidity.
Yeah, I guess we'll just see. I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on, because I feel like once one project does it and they have like a sort of successful model that other people can emulate, then there's going to be a whole other flag of people doing similar things.
Okay, final thing before we sign off. Tell me about the most exciting things that have crossed your radar in the last couple of weeks. What have you been looking at that has really got you excited, even though you haven't invested in them yet?
I think the GameFi stuff.
You asked me to add that GameFi channel, and I was expecting to see like a flood of GameFi projects in there.
There's a few that I think are actually good, and DeFi Kingdoms is probably like the number one. And they actually flipped Axie too. They're actually
is DeFi
valuation
an ETH based?
No, it's on Harmony, which is another layer one chain.
It's on Harmony.
Yeah,
they have their own tokens. It's like
they have one is their governance token, and they have really low gas fees, exactly like Solana, and you use MetaMask wallet and you just switch it from the Ethereum mainnet to the Harmony mainnet. So you can still do everything.
The initial transfer is you have to pay ETH gas fees?
Nope. I straight up just bought stuff from centralized exchange and then moved it to my MetaMask, and then you just go straight into the DeFi Kingdoms app and you just use the one that you just from your MetaMask.
And have you been playing in it, or you just been staking?
I've been staking, I've been liquidity providing, and I didn't put enough to where I could buy the NFT characters yet.
How much is an NFT character?
Right now it's about the cheap ones are about 35 jewel, and each jewel is around $20.
So what is it, 35 times 20? What is it, like $600?
Yeah, 600 something. And I bet the people that minted those NFTs minted them for like 5 or maybe like 10 Harmony or something. I don't know. I bet they made a bunch of money. um,
This
because
other
the
stuff like
value locked has gotten so big. They have, it's kind of gone down now, but when I first got into it, the total value locked in the whole thing was over $1 billion, like
that's
1.2
massive.
billion.
That's like really big, man.
Yeah.
Like for a game to have like $1 billion of liquidity inside of it. I mean, I guess over the scope of um, the adoption S curve, I mean, $1 billion might be nothing, a few years from now, but seems like pretty liquid. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like that's a unicorn. Like if someone gave you like a billion, if like someone is like, here's a bunch of Uber shares, and let's say there was a company called Fluber, and they had they had three cars, and your shares in Fluber, you had 5% of Fluber, but it's like, well, what is this like these shares are worth like a couple $1,000. But okay, good luck trying to sell your shares in Fluber, right? Because where's the market for that, right? Like nobody's
Mhm.
going to buy it. But like, let's say you have, $10,000 worth of Uber shares and it's got $1 billion, like even I think Uber right now is like 50, 100 billion, somewhere between that. It's a big company on the stock market, but because it's on the stock market, it's liquid. So, if I want to sell my Uber shares, there's a price like that's priced to the second, and it's like no problem to sell it. So like the depth of the liquidity on these markets is really important. Um, what's so interesting to me is to see someone like you who's was basically like communist last time I like last year. It's not that's not an insult, by the way. You were like a classic like musician, and working dude who's like working your ass off, but you were like dedicated to your craft, right? And so to you honestly, you understand high level finance concepts as good as anybody because you've been like putting your own money against it, and you're internalizing human behavior, and you understand the theories behind like economics and finance and human behavior to a level of some guy at like Goldman Sachs. So like you're I think you may not
Really?
believe it. Well, you don't believe it because you've never like worked in that space, and you haven't like you only in the last year have you been like dealing with this stuff. Let's say, but because we're dealing with like stupid names and things, like the person that I had to follow yesterday? I was called what was it, MILF Hunters or something? Oh, it was a MILF. It was MILF Maximalist, and I was like having to read through their tweets because they're like a Solana GameFi expert, and
Mhm.
I was trying to understand what they were like. They were like became a little bit of a niche expert in this field, and I was just thinking like, man, I never imagined like my world of finance would be me reading the tweets. It could be a little boy who's running this account, or it could be like a dirty old man. I'm assuming it's a man. Um, and I'm like, yeah, I have to follow like MILF Maximalist. And they've got the American Pie. Who's the guy in American Pie who like popularized MILF? He wanted to sleep with Stifler's mom.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
That
so
guy.
he's got that guy's image on his like Twitter, and it only doesn't feel like finance because it's all this like stupid uh, NFT shit, but
Hmm.
you're doing finance, man, and you understand concepts that even for me, I'm like I haven't like I saw that in school like whatever XYZ years ago. So, anyways, it's funny to see your transformation.
I just want to show people that you don't have to do this, like you don't have to go to school to understand these concepts for finance. Like you can just dive into it, and maybe you won't understand everything, but like if you can have it explained to you in a simple way, then you can start your journey.
No, you have to go to Kelly Miller School to understand guys like MILF Hunter and slow rug, soft rug, long rug, and all these other. Hilarious concept. I mean, honestly, it might end up making the next generation incredibly financially savvy just by gamification um, of money. What's so funny to the final point is when I was doing my master's in international trade over in DC, I remember having this conversation because I had come back from China and we had this book that was kind of like a narrative book talking about Chrysler was one of the first Western companies to open a plant in China. And it was in the late 80s. And there was a whole book written about it. And this guy's like first person narrative of like the insane behaviors that at that time, the like communist Chinese managers and workers, the like culture clash and between both, like there's like a American to China culture clash, but there was also like a capitalist to communist culture clash. And there was like examples of things like what was it like the manager was pissed off that the American manager was pissed off that the Chinese managers had cots in their offices to like take naps in the middle of the day. And like he was like we don't take naps at work. Like you, when you're at work, you work. And from the employers, the Chinese perspective, they were the communist perspective. They were like, we're tired, man. We need to like be able to rest and things like that. And I remember there was a conversation where I'd been traveling to like freshly converted from communism to like capitalist transition countries. And I was saying that I had conversations with people over there that like basic concepts of how things work. There's like economics is partially invented by humans, but it's partially discovered. You know that debate between is math invented or is it discovered? Like there are principles that hold up whether or not you want to believe them or not, right? Like you can like that's part of the reason why a lot of like communist concepts don't work is like it's not about constructing in our mind that we should all just behave this way. Human beings just don't behave certain ways. Like they have individualist segment. There's also communal aspects to human behavior, but there's also like individual aspects to human behavior. And that's why like extreme individualism or extreme communitarianism, they have like flaws, you know, and that will be true regardless of whether you believe it to be true. So that one of the conversations was I was having a conversation in the class that like, you know, in America, we grow up playing Monopoly. We grow up playing money games. And like when I was a kid, we had to, our school sent us around the neighborhoods with magazine subscriptions to like sign people up. And girls would have to sell cookies and boys and girls would have to sell lemonade on the corner. And we're like trained from little kids to be commercial actors, right? Like to engage in commerce, and these types of concepts were not trained in certain countries for like a long time. So you enter the world coming from America and like things that seem matter of fact to you, they're not matter of fact to a lot of people and they come at them fresh. And so that's you. And now you're going to be this big fat cat. You and Steve Aoki are going to be these millionaire artists. And I'll have to send you I'll have to beg your secretary to let me get an appointment on your Calendly.
Someday.